I want to wish all of you a very happy Diwali. And I'd like to just share very briefly, or we'll be a little shorter than our normal classes this evening, but I'd like to share with you a few thoughts about Diwali and a little inspiration, I hope, and a little story. And I'm going to begin with the prayer, invoking the presence of Divine Mother, the great masters of self-realization, beloved Lord Ram. May our hearts be temples filled with devotion, strong enough to draw Thee into our inner temple of our hearts. Enliven us, fill us with Thy light to overcome the darkness in this world. May our journey home be straight to Thee, that Ayodhya within ourselves. Om, joy, peace, Amen. And again, welcome to everybody. And, of course, today is Diwali, and I can hear outside, I can hear the crackers are starting to go off. And maybe you'll be able to hear them in the background too. But Diwali is obviously it's a very special time. And it's the wonderful thing about it is so universal. And you can see that Diwali, even in other traditions, people celebrate Diwali, and although they may not be of the Indian persuasion or background, nevertheless people recognize the truth behind it if once they come to realize that Diwali are times of celebration, but they're outwardly, and of course it's related, of course, to the story of Ram and so on, and his return to Ayodhya. But it doesn't take one very long to understand that they're also reminders, this holiday in particular, of universal realities, which I think makes Diwali so appealing. It's a reminder of something much deeper within ourselves. And it's one festival among many, of course, in India, and also festivals in other traditions as well. And I think all festivals in some way are reminders. They're the outward, but I think in all of them, they remind us of certain essential truths that are within ourselves. They're often symbolic, but they're reminders that, especially Diwali, that sometimes the path seems dark. It seems like evil is triumphing in this world, and that darkness is pervasive sometimes, and it can be somewhat discouraging. But it reminds us, and especially Diwali is in this way, that light, the lights that accompany our traditional winter celebration, is the true reality. And we take that a bit further, and it reminds us that the spiritual path itself is a journey. It's a journey, a return journey home, of remembering that truth of our own true nature. And when we remember something, we are stirred. And anytime, I think, and this is the function of festivals, they remind us of our true home. And festivals do that. And festivals are to perhaps dedicated to some particular aspect of the divine, some particular God. But in a sense, all of them are reminding us of a divine reality. And so in that sense, I think you could say that every day, if we choose, every day can be a Diwali, a day of remembering that light is the true reality, and that the quest for that light really resides within ourselves. And to awaken that light and make that light a reality for ourselves, we're reminded of that is Ram's journey is our journey back to union with God. And thinking of that, I was thinking of the Ramayana, Ram's story, and I just wanted to share one of my favorite stories this evening, and perhaps a message that it also conveys to us. And it's the story I think all of you know, of course, if unless you're new to these traditions. It's a story of Sabari, and she was a woman of tribe. She came from a tribal village, and so consequently, many looked down upon her. But she was a very, very sincere seeker who wanted to know the meaning of Dharma. She wanted to find liberation. She wanted to find truth. And she served and went to Sage Batanga, and she served him for many years and became his disciple, one of his many disciples, and very, very devoted. And when Sage Matanga was about to die, she was serving him and she asked him for, you might say, a boon, or she asked him for a blessing that she be able to, in her lifetime, be able to attain that same state of peace, of inner realization as Matunga had in his life. And because he loved her very much, because she had served him so faithfully, he told her that she would be able to attain that state if she would, and his advice to her was to offer service to Ram. And if she did so faithfully, Ram would give her his darshan, and that he would come to her. And so she took this, in very deep faith with her guru, and told, and Saint Matunga had told her that to await his arrival, and then he passed on into Mahasamadhi. So Sabri was a simple soul. She lived in the company of where she was with other ascetics, and as I said, many of the ascetics kind of looked down upon her because she was simple, and of course of her background. But she vowed to serve Ram as best she could in whatever way she could, even though her life was very simple and somewhat limited. But she vowed that. So every day, in order of service to Ram, she would go out into the forest and she would pluck berries, find berries for Ram, and she would keep only the best berries, and that she wanted to have these berries ready for when Ram would come to her house as promised by Saint Matanga. Well, she wanted the sweetest of berries, and so being a simple woman, she tested each berry. So she would take a little taste of each of the berries to make sure that they were the sweetest of berries. And she didn't realize, of course, that, by eating them, it was somewhat against custom, let's say, to do that. It's not proper to make an offering of something to Ram that you had already tasted. So, but nevertheless, she didn't know that. And she would return to her home every day with the berries, and she would then prepare the house, sweep the path, make everything proper in anticipation of Ram's coming. And of course, other renunciates in that area, they made fun of her and said, why would Ram come to your house, simple woman that you are, that you know nothing of the great teachings as we do, of these yogis? And they were doing, what penance are you doing? What austerities are you undertaking as a worship, you might say, as a form of worship to Ram? So they looked down upon her, but she didn't do that. But when Ram came, of course, to whose home did Ram go? He went only to Sabri's home because of her steadfast devotion. And he said, and she, of course, said to Ram, says, well, there are many exalted yogis waiting for you, yet you come to this unworthy devotee's home. And so she was very, very, uplifted, blessed by that, Ram's presence there. And then she offered the berries to him, and she offered the berries, and as Ram began to taste the berries, Lakshman pointed out to me, he said, is this proper? Sabri has already tasted them, and therefore this offering of hers is unworthy. And then Ram said to Lakshman, he said, of all the types of food I have eaten, nothing could equal the taste of these berries, because she's offered him with such devotion. And of course, you could sort of say, whoever offers a fruit, leaf, or flower with love and devotion, I partake in it with great joy. And so Ram blessed Sabri with a divine vision and gave her that blessing. And of course, eventually, of course, it was Sabri who tells Rama how he can find Sugriva. to be able to help him in his recovery of, Sita. But the point here is that Sabri's devotion was such that because of her devotion, she was able to attract that blessing of Ram to her. And I think this is, you might say, in when we approach, because when we approach the spiritual path, we celebrate, and we have to really receive that blessing, receive that offering. It's an act of devotion to remember it, just not as an outward festival, but in the process of remembering and celebrating this great holiday of Diwali. There's so much more that comes back to us when we celebrate with the devotional heart. And this is, you might say, the lesson that Sabri illustrates. And it is in response to that, Ram then gives his very famous discourse on the various aspects of what is truly devotion. And he says to her, he says, anyone, Sabri, anyone who practices one of these forms of devotion that I just told you, that bhakti pleases me more and reaches me without fail. That, and I'll read here, he says, that which is most difficult for the greatest yogis was easily attained by you, Sabri, because of your sincere devotion. So in a sense, we remember Ram, and we remember Ram's story and the illustration of how that is reflected in our spiritual search through just the remembrance of it is a devotional act. But if we then take it and put that devotion into practice and offer ourselves one-pointedly to Ram and immerse ourselves ultimately in that consciousness of the divine. But particularly, also, I'd like to focus on one particular point in terms of our devotion. Devotion is often thought in terms of, you might say, our feeling, how we feel about our love for Ram, and you might say offering outward ritual ceremonies. But we must remember that when God comes in the form of an avatar, or whether it's just our devotion to God in some form or another, God needs instruments in this world. And we're being called to take action, to be able to work in this world in such a way as to be able to bring about that which the great ones, such as Ram and all the great avatars, the purpose for why they come into this world. And that's to bring light. And I think to work for ourselves, we start by awakening that light within ourselves, and that in itself is a form of offering, a form of devotion, to bring light to dispel the darkness within each of our hearts, but then to take it even one step further. And I think this is important for the world right now. The world needs light. We can see in various situations going on around the world, we can see that darkness to some degree is on the ascendant. And I suppose that's the case in all ages. But this time that we're entering into, in this age of Dwapara, as Swami Sri Yukteswar and our masters have said, we're entering into an age of restlessness. It's a higher age than from what we've come out of, but nevertheless, it's not a high age in and of itself. And it is a time of great energy, but great energy can be expressed in positive ways and it can be expressed in negative ways. And I think we're seeing in the world right now, we're seeing manifestations of that negative energy, warfare, discord, disunion, the animosities being expressed in one way or another in society. And I think perhaps you might even say this pandemic that we've just experienced and I hope we're coming out of. Master said these are often caused and drawn to this world because of the consciousness in which society that expresses, and it begins to draw and magnetize these negative forces to us. And so at a time like this, the world especially needs active instruments. Now, by that, I don't mean outwardly, going out, uh, expressing ourselves outwardly and carrying a sign and picketing or things like that. Although there's not anything necessarily wrong if it's for a good cause of doing that, but I'm saying being an expression of light in whatever we do, to be able to have that consciousness of divinity in our individual daily actions. And I think Diwali can express that and can inspire us to be instruments of Ram in everything that we do. Our neighbors, our interactions with the local merchants down the street, our friends, our family, to consciously bless one another. And I think that can be, for many of us, a natural tendency on these festival days. In our tradition of Diwali, that's certainly the case, but even other religions, all of these festival days remind us to be an instrument, be at our highest octave, and to share that with other people. So let's try to make, in the year ahead, let's try to make every day in this spirit a day of Diwali, a day of sharing, a day of being an instrument for that divine light. And I think in this way, for those of us who are disciples of the great masters of self-realization, we act as true disciples. A true disciple just expresses, you could say, the blessings of the Guru in their own life. And I think Diwali inspires that approach to our daily life. So let's take it to heart and become the disciples in this sense of Ram and Sita, and bring light into the world. So on this special day, Diwali, I wish you all the best and many blessings to all of you. Joy to you.